Okay, so I've got a very stupid but extremely viable way to test whether or not you've got yourself a solid character. Ask yourself, what is that character's favorite Golden Girl? Or if you haven't seen Golden Girls, doesn't have to be Golden Girls, just pick some kind of pop culture thing. What is your character's favorite character? I'm not asking you to describe logically why yet. I just want you to have some kind of emotional opinion. Just grab onto something. If you can't feel who your character's favorite Golden Girl would be, you have not yet developed a character. That is one of the most basic things. Because here's how stuff like that works. There's really no logical Golden Girl that would be the best answer. Like, you can't be objectively correct about it. You just have to have a feeling, and then you grab a hold of it, and then you can explain why you have that feeling afterward. Your explanation can be full of holes, it can be completely stupid, but the point is, that's the favorite Golden Girl for your character, and they'll defend it because they have feelings about it. After all, that's the essence of narrative-based role-playing, right? You have all these NPCs and these things going around, and yes, these are fictional things, but you just have a feeling about stuff. You have feelings about these NPCs, or about this city, or this country, and then you act on those feelings. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is because the last video was about why 3d6 is better, since it makes a more stable bell curve, and the comments that I got on it, a couple of them, were the really predictable ones, which were rolling a d20 is super unstable, which is more fun because I don't know what I'm gonna get. Random tables are fun. Randomness is fun. I really need the randomness because I'm gonna get a little hostile here. My character's life is really sad sack because they have no interests or ambitions. If I don't occasionally roll a 1, then I'll just continue on the path that's in front of me and nothing will ever change or be interesting. Now, I know I'm being mean, and people talk about failing forward and stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, you fail, but then you fail in interesting ways and you move forward through it, and that is an art that you can follow. But what I think about is video games. So let's suppose you're playing Knights of the Old Republic, right? You just have a dialogue tree, and then sometimes they'll give you a persuasion option. That is actually a d20 system, and so sometimes you'll try to persuade an NPC of something and you fail, even though you had the skills to pass or whatever. And then because it's a video game, you would be locked if they didn't give you another option. So there's a scene in Knights of the Old Republic where you're supposed to get past a droid. And if you fail your persuasion check on that droid, you go to another droid and you complain to them, and that other droid will help you set up a droid coup. You kill the first droid, and then you get to go through the door anyway. That game kind of sets up a failing forward motion so that you can fail and then continue on, even though you personally don't make any real choices, you're just choosing from a tree. Now, a lot of groups actually play sort of like Knights of the Old Republic. One of the things that they think is cool about role-playing is that you're still fundamentally choosing good, bad, or neutral choices, but you get to make up your own dialogue. And yeah, I mean, the NPCs are just going to lead you down the same set of tracks that the GM planned in the first place, so your choices don't really matter, and you're not going to make too much of a fuss about it. You don't have that many feelings on where you're going or why you're going there, but you got to make your own dialogue, so it feels more personal. And that is kind of cool. That's one thing that is better than a video game about playing D&D or other role-playing systems like they were video games. But by no means is that the limit of what we can do with a role-playing game. It's certainly the limit of a lot of groups. I find that very few groups ever know what I mean when I explain to them like a player-led game. Like, I have honestly, more times than I am happy about, talk to people and then have them say like, yeah, I did a player-led game. We rolled on random tables and then we did adventures based on the random results. Or even more frustratingly, they'll say, yeah, I've done a player-led game. I once made a backstory for my character, and then the GM created a bunch of story beats around that backstory, and I chose options based on his story that he wrote. That's player-led, right? And no, that's not a player-led game. To have a true player-led game, you need to go back to that thing I started with. How does your character feel about the Golden Girls? Who is their favorite Golden Girl? Would they kill to protect the name of that Golden Girl? Would they topple a nation for Blanche or for Rose? The current king likes the wrong Golden Girl. He must be dethroned, and someone with some level of sanity has to be put in his place. Obviously, there are better reasons to topple a kingdom, but the fact is, if you have a character who is emotionally bent around that motive, then that is what you can go do, and the GM can respond to it. And of course, it doesn't have to be something as big as toppling a kingdom. It could be something like you're just mad at your neighbors because their sheep keep eating grass on your land. And, now you're going to go and beat them up. You get your buddies and you have like a whole game about sheep to sheep warfare. I don't care. The players are leading, I'll GM it, whatever you guys want to do. In fact, the way that I usually set up a sandbox game is I will design all of my NPCs and all the factions and everything before I look at player characters or anything else. And then I just tell the players, all right, so here's the setting. These are the major players in the setting that you're aware of, and this is what they all kind of do. I want you to make characters that have feelings about these factions, preferably hate-filled feelings, and then go. Just go. Kick someone in the face. Choose one of these guys, go kick their butts. Just do it. Get them. There's not encounters, and especially there's not social encounters. I view the entire premise of a social encounter to be antithetical and toxic to role-playing as a whole. Talking to people is not an encounter. That is how you gather information on your enemies and figure out the best way to attack them. Like, if you're gonna kill an entire gang of supervillains with weird superpowers, you gotta figure out which one of them likes which Golden Girls, and figure out which one of them are on your team. That's how you get spies behind enemy lines. You figure out where they keep their ammunition dumps, and you blow it up. And then you find out where their leader lives, and you replace his shampoo with Nair shampoo so his hair falls out and everyone laughs at him, and then everyone's demoralized, and then you sweep in and you kill them all and you call them all bald. You like the wrong Golden Girl, you idiot! Now everyone's dead! And okay, you can make alliances. They don't all have to like Blanche. They can like Rose. You'll make an alliance with Rose. But all the other Golden Girls, oh, it's unforgivable. That's why you'll use Rose's pathetic lackeys. You'll line them all up and throw them at the enemy, and when they've wasted their resources, you'll attack them from behind. It's a classic maneuver right out of the Art of War. And when they look up at you with their broken and destroyed bodies and they say, why? You'll say, because Blanche represents beauty and the natural order. You thought you could get away with liking Rose? There was no escape. This was the inevitable outcome, whether from me or anyone else. But I'm proud it was me. And alright, that's insane, but I know that as a GM, it is so much easier to work with and make content for a player who locks into themselves like that, who knows what they want and why they're doing it, and most importantly, how they feel about it. Because what's your counter speech? You know, your NPCs can say things like, but all the Golden Girls are friends, don't you see? We're defying everything the Golden Girls stand for. And then your psychopathic player character can rant about how, like, oh, they're never really friends. Blanche is just using them. She knows they're all fools and you fell for it too. I don't know. It's not an objectively correct stance to have. It's just a driving motive for the character, and there is a point of no return. I mean, like, once you rally an army to kill people in the name of Blanche, you can't unrally the army. You have to keep going forward. The game has momentum, see? Like, a bunch of people are invested in your stance in Blanche now, and you have to stick to Blanche, because if you suddenly say, you know what, actually, maybe Rose is the best Golden Girl, well, you're going to be stabbed to death by everybody around you because your whole power base is based on liking Blanche. After all, through all this like emotional stuff, you not only develop yourself, but all the NPCs really well, because if they don't express sharp feelings about something, then odds are pretty good you might have killed them in the Golden Girl Wars already. You have to either side with Blanche or step aside. And anyway, never when I play those types of games do I ever find myself saying, like, oh man, this is fun, but you know what would make the game really crazy? If I rolled 1 more often. I sure do hate being able to rely on my skills. Oh, and wouldn't it be cool if I missed my attacks like half the time? So combat took twice as long, and we just couldn't get around to anything else today? No, I don't need the D20 to tell me what interesting thing is going to happen next. I don't need the occasional failure on the D20 to do some kind of interesting thing. It's not necessary, I don't get the appeal. I get why people rely on it, but it is a crutch, and I understand that not everybody necessarily has the psychological ability to just like put their hands on the wheel and say like, I'm gonna kill this entire city over a disagreement about which Golden Girl is best. The rest of your group may not appreciate it. I mean, I have been in groups that did not like it when players tried to control the game. But of course, the Golden Girl thing is one of the more insane and hyperbolic examples I could give. I've never actually played that. I would. It sounds really fun, but I've never really played it. But obviously, you know, you can dial that up and down to whatever levels are appropriate for the game. For example, I once played in a Star Wars game, and when I made my character, I told the GM, like, I want to be a criminal, like a fence. You know, I buy and I sell stolen goods. So when the party kills these other guys and they get their lightsabers and their illegal blasters and things, I know where to sell those, so it's not a total loss. And the GM was like, okay, that sounds cool. And then they explained to me that we were trying to rescue some guy named Dalamic, who had been captured by a terrorist cell of former Imperial soldiers. And I was like, what? Why are we gonna go rescue him? What's he doing for us? And they were like, well, you know, he's a dude. No one else is around. I mean, wouldn't you want to be rescued? And I said, yeah, I guess. But why is it gotta be us? And that was the beginning of me more or less changing the direction of that game, because I was one of the few ones who was expressing feelings about anything that was going on in the game. What wound up happening is I just kept asking questions, like the reward we got, it turned out that Dalamic was connected to some kind of mining syndicate, so he gave us a bunch of raw minerals to transport, but we had one of those commercial freighters, and I was like, this for transporting guns, or television sets, or something, it's not for raw material. Well, we're gonna go to a major industrial world, and we're gonna give him, like, a tiny compartment ship full of raw material? That's gonna be like throwing sand on the beach and asking to be paid for it. Are you kidding? You know, I went on. I was like, well, we gotta go talk to the Hutts. I mean, the Hutts are the ones who are gonna get us hooked up with profitable business ventures. And then sure enough, you know, it turned out the Hutts were on the planet we went to, and the GM started making plans to do jobs for the Hutts and everything. A player with motives and feelings and opinions who will grab the NPCs by the shirt and be like, what are you all about, man? Who do you know? Why are you here? Explain yourself. Who are your friends? Who are your enemies? Are they my enemies? Are they my friends? What do we get out of you? How can we help you so that I can be helped? That is some catnip to most GMs. I don't know if I've ever played a game where the GM didn't change some of the game to accommodate my character. And it won't just be small changes, like, oh, they give me a little bit of backstory fluff for me to work out. Like, major plot elements will sometimes shift towards my character because I will have such strong personalities in these games. Like, I will play a motive, and the GM will be like, oh, yeah. And if they respond to that motive, I will ask the GM, like, what are your NPCs doing? And then the GM gets to play a bunch of different dynamic characters and create social webs and do all kinds of fun things. He can trick me. He can introduce me to a spy. I'll accept the spy in. And then when he betrays me, I'll act really angry. I'll want to kill him. I want to kill his boss. I'll be driven. And the GM, it's just like, oh my God. Yes. And it winds up being a dialogue. Like, the GM will start to figure out what motivates this character. So, you know, the GM introduces the spy to betray me because he realizes the character will then go after whoever betrayed him. Like, oh, I'll be furious. And so if the GM wanted to go in a certain direction with the story, he just has to pull that logical, emotional string, and I'll go there. And I'll make it belong to the character, but also we'll know all the people involved and why we hate them. It'll feel good. It'll feel organic. It will not be random. I never roll insight checks on player characters or NPCs. I play how I think the character would feel about things. And, as nice as I make this sound, that's where the conflict arises. Because you will oftentimes find players who are very gamist and who don't roleplay and they don't understand motives, they understand objectives. Even though we're playing characters, we bring our personal psychologies to the table, we can't help it, we're humans, and the people who don't play characters at all will bring just their personality to the table every single time. And if they are that type, they will step in and they'll say, whoa, 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 whoa. Before we have the Golden Girl Wars, which sounds crazy, what if we just have, like, normal interactions and try to objectively succeed at everything? And 5% of the time, we'll roll a 1, and then we'll fail that forward. Wouldn't that be fun? And yeah, failing forward can be fun, but, like, on 3d6 or a more stable bell curve, we do fail forward sometimes still. You still get bad rolls. Do we have to fail forward that often? And ironically, of course, the person suggesting this tends not to be that interesting when they fail forward. They rely a lot on the GM to tell them the circumstance, and the GM really kind of has to help them fail forward, or practically tell the story for them. Unfortunately, though, that guy who needs the dice to make things interesting for him artificially will inevitably speak up in a player-driven game because they tend to get left out. Like, GMs will latch on to motive characters. Like, there is so much more to do. It is so much more fun to GM. Like, the GM is getting to play too. They aren't just, you know, pushing the characters around in the story wagon, telling them that this is where you gotta go next. Come on, players. Come on. Come on. Come on. Please. The motivated players are reacting to the NPCs. They like this NPC. They hate that NPC. Oh, I can do things with it. It is so much more exciting. And the players who are going to just sit in that wagon and wait for the GM to pull them, they don't get pulled as often. The GM doesn't come to them as much. And they don't know what to do about it, so they kind of try to adjust play and bring it back to a more passive state so that they can be more involved. This ultimately is just one more reason why a lot of groups will separate out into certain types of players. So the guys who are going to need a D20 to make the game interesting will all get together and they will play together, and they will kind of shun motivated or narrative-driven players. Those really motivated, narrative-driven guys will just take over, and the GM will only want to interact with them. And really good narrative character players are harder to find, but they try to find each other because if everybody's really motivated and everyone has lots of feelings, then you wind up bouncing off of each other and everyone gets to share limelight. It's a ton of fun. And nobody who plays like that ever wants to be stopped and told, hey, could you take yourself out of your character a little bit and not have as strong feelings about the setting and the game and everything in it? I just want to slow down and focus on the dice rolls more. Just let the players without motives take over for a half hour so they can do nothing, and everyone falls asleep and starts playing on their phone. At least until they roll a 1, and then the GM makes a big deal of it and goes, a 1! Oh my gosh, you slip! And then everyone laughs and they're like, oh wow, a 1, what bad luck! You know, I get it. Having those random moments from the really flat statistical distribution means that you get everyone's attention back on the table from time to time, because otherwise everybody at the table is really boring and no one is very motivated to pay attention. It has its use as a tool, and it is important. Like, some groups and some players really are not going to be able to get away from it, and I suppose you should stay with it. But if you are, you think, able to do a narrative player and to do motives, and to create a character who has such strong feelings about golden girls that you would topple a nation, then for sure the D20 is not really doing anything for you. Like, whatever wacky pants thing you're up to, everybody is probably already paying attention, and hopefully they're, like, involved. And in a really good group, they've also got their own wacky pants stuff going on. Maybe you grab a hold of them and be like, come on with me, we gotta go do wacky pants stuff. Then you murder a guy, because that's what you do in role-playing games most of the time. Eventually you murder somebody. And, it's all just so much that you really don't need to stop every, 20 things that you do and have the GM embellish the story about, oh, how you totally screwed up this time. Because basically everything you're doing is like, oh my god, you totally screwed up this time. Well, what next, motivated players? Oh, something else crazy. Okay, here we go. So, yes, like I say, I get why the D20 is really, really important to some groups. If your group cannot get away from the D20, you need that randomness. There is a reason for it, and the reason is basically that you need it to keep the game interesting. You need it to pull people's attention away from their phones, because if someone doesn't slip and fall every so often, then no one, you'll lose the group. But of course, not every group needs the D20 to keep things interesting. So, the bottom line is, figure out your character's favorite golden girl, and then go to war over it. Have feelings, stay interesting, make GMing feel like a privilege instead of like a chore. Or don't, if your group can't. But if you're in a group that doesn't, and you think you can, be aware that there are other people who can. And while they're hard to find, they are out there. So, fat lot of good this video ultimately does, everybody. I hope you found it worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me. I hope you'll catch me for the next